Hey friends, welcome to Codage. In this session, we will see how to authorize APIs in the API gateway using Lambda Authorizer, which is also called as a custom authorizer. So here we will first create a backend service for which we will create a Lambda function. After that, we will create APIs in the API gateway, which we will call our backend service, that is our Lambda function. Then we will create access token and store that access token into the AWS SSM parameter store, and we will encrypt that access token using the AWS KMS key. After that, we will create one more Lambda function and we will use that Lambda function as a Lambda authorizer. Now, when user requests the API from the API gateway, it will send the access token into the request header. Now, API gateway will forward this access token to the Lambda authorizer, and Lambda authorizer will fetch the access token from the SSM parameter store, and it will match this access token with the token that is sent by the user. And based on this, Lambda authorizer will generate the IAM policy. So this IAM policy will contain effect as allow or deny access to the backend service. Now API gateway will evaluate this IAM policy and it will decide to allow or deny access to the API resources, that is to our backend service. Now in this case, let's say it allow access to the backend service. So backend service will send response back to the API gateway, and API gateway will forward that response back to the user. Now let's say our access token does not get matched with the token that is stored into the SSM parameter store. In that case, Lambda authorizer will generate a policy with the effect as a deny. Then API gateway will deny access to the backend service and it will send response back to the user as an unauthorized access. So whenever we create API in the API gateway of the type of HTTP or a REST, and when we integrate Lambda authorizer for it, API gateway provides a different integration options. So these are the integration options. So when you create a REST API, you can configure your Lambda event payload of the type of token or a request. And when you create HTTP type of API, and if you configure Lambda authorizer for it, in that case, you can configure response mode as a simple or a IAM policy. So let's see all this configuration one by one. So first option was Lambda event payload of the type of token. So when you create a REST API with this configuration, user will send the access token from the request header and Lambda authorizer will send back the IAM policy. So this is the same configuration we see in the first diagram. So next configuration is Lambda event payload of the type of request. So here user will send the access token using query string parameter, or there are other options also available. So these are the other options. So user can send access token using the header or a multi-value header, or a query string or a multi-value query string, or a stage variable or a context, or you can use the combination of all these parameters, right? After that, API gateway will forward this token to the Lambda authorizer, and Lambda authorizer will send the IAM policy back to the API gateway. So let's see the next integration. So next configuration is with the HTTP API. Okay, so here whenever you configure Lambda authorizer for your HTTP API, you can configure response mode as a simple. So what will happen here? User will send the access token using the request header to the API gateway. In that case, API gateway will forward that access token to the Lambda authorizer, and based on the access token, Lambda authorizer will send true or a false value back to the API gateway. And based on this Boolean value, API gateway will decide to allow access to the backend service or deny access to the backend service. And next configuration is response mode with the IAM policy. And here user will send the access token using the request header only, and the Lambda authorizer will send the IAM policy back to the API gateway. Okay, so we are going to see all this configuration in our demonstration. So let's move on to the demonstration. In the AWS console, search for the Lambda function. So this Lambda function will be our backend service. Click on the create function and let me give name as a Lambda as backend service. Okay, runtime will be Python. Click on the create function. Okay, so our Lambda function is created successfully. We will keep body as a default one, that is hello from Lambda. Next, what we will do, we will create a access token that will be a secret token in the SSM parameter store. So search for the system manager. And in the left panel, you can find option for the parameter store. So click on the parameter store, click on the create parameter. So let me give a name to our parameter. So our parameter name will be slash my app slash access token. Okay, so you can give any name to your parameter. Tier will be standard. Type we are going to create as a secure string. And here it is a KMS configuration. So here KMS key source will be our current account. And KMS key ID will be alias slash AWS slash SSM. That is a default key provided by KMS. So here you can create your own customized key as well using KMS service. So we are going to select default one. And using this key, SSM parameter will encrypt the value. So let me give value as a XYZ123. So this will be our dummy value for our access token. And SSM parameter will encrypt this value using the KMS key from the KMS service. And key ID will be this one. Okay. Click on the create parameter. Okay, so we have created the access token. Next, we will create a Lambda function, which we will use for our Lambda authorization functionality. So search for Lambda again. Click on the create function and let me give name as a Lambda for auth and runtime will be Python. Click on the create function. Okay, so our function is created successfully. Now what we will do first, we will try to fetch this access token into our Lambda function. So for that purpose, we will use the Boto3 library. So import Boto3 here. Okay. Next, we will get the object using this Boto3. So we are getting object of SSM. So parameter for this will be SSM service name and region name will be AP-South-1. So this is our region name, that is Mumbai. Okay. And in the same region, we have created our access token, that is in the AP-South-1 region. Okay. Next, what we will do, we will fetch the access token. So let me copy code for that. Now let's understand this code. So what I'm doing first, I'm assigning the access token name to the parameter name. Next, I'm calling the get parameter method. So here I am passing first parameter as a parameter name, that is our token name. And next parameter is true or false. Okay. So what does it mean by true or false? So this get parameter method will use the KMS key from the KMS service and it will decrypt the value of this token and it will return the value from the SSM parameter store. Let's print this token and we will see what value it is returning. So let's click on the deploy. Now if I run this function, it is going to fail. Why? Because this Lambda function don't have access to the parameter store. So when it call the get parameter method, it first trying to fetch the value from the SSM parameter store, and second, it is trying to decrypt that value using the KMS key. So first access it will require to the access the SSM parameter store, and second access it will require to access the KMS key. So if I try and run this Lambda function, it will give the exception. So let me do that. Click on the test. Event name will be test event. Click on the save and let's run this function. Okay, you can see here it is giving the access denied exception when calling get parameter operation. Let's go into the configuration. And here in the execution role section, we can assign the role to this Lambda function. So click on this role name. So here for this Lambda, there is already one policy attached, that is a basic execution rule. So let's add the policy for SSM parameter store and the KMS. So click on the add permission, click on the create inline policy. Search for the system manager service. And here effect will be allow. Here we will provide the read access. Read access for the get parameter operation. Next, we need to specify the resource. So click on the add ARN here. So resource in that will be from this account. Region will be AP-south-1, in which we have created our parameter, that is AP-south-1, right? Next, we will provide the resource parameter name without leading slash. So let me go into the parameter store and just copy this name without leading slash. Okay, so this is our ARN. So click on the add ARN and click on the next button. So let's give name to our policy. Policy name will be SSM demo policy. Okay, click on the create policy. So first policy is attached to our Lambda function. Let's add policy for the KMS. So click on the create inline policy button. Search for the KMS. And here effect will be allow. And here we will provide the write access for decryption. So select decrypt option here and click on the add ARN. Resource will be from this account. Resource region will be AP-south-1. Okay. Resource key will be, let's go into the KMS service, search for KMS and click on the AWS managed key because we are using the AWS default key. The key that we use was AWS/SSM. So copy this key ID here and let's paste here. Okay, click on the add ARN, click on the next. And let's give policy name. Policy name will be KMS demo policy. Click on the create policy. Okay, so we have attached both the policy to our Lambda function. If you go back into the Lambda and just click on this refresh button. Okay, so you can see here it has added both the policies. Now let's go back into our code. Let me close this execution result and let's test this function again. Okay, so we are getting the response as a hello world from Lambda, and here we can see the token value. Okay, so this is our token value, that is XYZ123, and it has written the response in the JSON format. Okay, so our function is ready. Now what we will do, we will create the API in the API gateway, and when we attach this function as an authorizer, at that time we will change this code again. Okay, so let's search for the API gateway. And here we will create the API of the type REST API. So click on the build and let me give name as a demo REST API. Endpoint type will be regional. Click on the create API. Let's add the resource. So click on the create resource. Resource name will be, let's say, get data. Okay, you can give any name to your resource. Click on the create resource button. And in the resource, we will add the method. So click on the create method. Method type will be get, and we are going to integrate Lambda function. So search for the Lambda. So Lambda as a backend service. This is what we have created for the backend. And region name will be AP-south-1, in which we have created our Lambda function. And click on the create method. Okay, so our API is created. Now let's deploy this API onto the stage. So click on the deploy API. Here we will create a new stage. So click on the new stage. Stage name will be dev. Okay, so we have deployed our API. Click on this invoke URL and let's run this URL in the browser. So path will be get data. Okay, so we are getting response from our Lambda function. Now next what we will do, we will authorize these APIs. So you can find option for the authorizer from the left side menu. So click on this authorizer option here and here click on the create an authorizer. So let me give name as a REST authorizer, that is REST auth. Authorization type will be Lambda and let's search for our Lambda function. So Lambda function that we have created for authorization was Lambda for auth. Then Lambda event payload types. So here there are two options, that is first option is a token, second is a request. So first we will go with the token, after this we will go with the request. And here you need to specify the token source. So let me give name as a authorization token. Okay, and let's disable this option, that is authorization caching, and click on the create authorizer button here. Okay, so REST authorizer is created and here you can see token source is authorization token and this is what we are going to send through request header. Now let's go back into the Lambda for auth function and here we are going to change this code as per our Lambda authorizer. So I have already code for this, so let me copy that code. So let's understand this code. So what I'm doing here, first I'm reading the value from the SSM parameter store, right? And I'm assigning that value to the token variable. Next, I am reading the authorization token from this event. Okay, I am using the same key that we have mentioned in the authorizer. If you see here, token source we have mentioned as a authorization token. The same key I am using here from the event. So this event is going to send by API gateway to this Lambda function. Next, I am creating the condition. So what I am doing here, I am checking the token from the header that is sent by the user is equal to token that is coming from the SSM parameter store. Now, if you go into the execution result, the token that is written by the SSM parameter store will be in the JSON format. So how we are going to read this value from the parameter and in the value section. So if you go into the Lambda function, we are doing the same thing. In the token, we are reading from the parameter and from the parameter, we are reading from the value. Now, based on this condition, we are assigning the allow or deny to the auth status variable. Next, we are creating the IAM policy here. Okay, so this is first is a principal ID, which I hard coded here. So you can create a unique ID and assign it to the principal ID. Next is a policy document in which I am creating the statement. So in the statement, first line is action. So what is the action? This policy allow API gateway to execute this Lambda function. So next is a resource. Resource will be our API from the API gateway, which will call this Lambda function. And to get the ARN of that API, I am using the event. And from the event, we can get that ARN using this method ARN keyword. Next is the effect. So based on this condition, it will be allow or deny. And next I am returning this IAM policy. Let's click on this deploy option here. Next we will go into the API gateway and here and let's click on this authorizer and here we can test our authorizer. So our token value will be XYZ123 which we have created in the parameter store, right? So click on the test authorizer button here. Now you can see we have received the policy with the effect as a allow, right? Now if you go some another value to the token value, let's say 234 and let's test this authorizer. Now it will give the effect as a deny because our token is not getting matched with the token from the SSM parameter store. Okay. Now what we will do next, we will attach this authorizer to our resource. So let me go into the resources click on this get, and in the method request setting you can see authorizer currently it is none. So click on the edit and select your authorizer, that is REST authorizer. Okay, click on the save, and let's click on the deploy API option. Deploy on the stage, click on the deploy. Okay, so our API is deployed on the stage. Click on this invoke URL. So this is web UI of the Postman. So let me copy the URL, and path name will be get data, right? And click on the send button. So it will give exception, that is unauthorized, right? Now what we will do? So we will provide our token from the header. Okay. So our token keyword was, let me go into the API gateway, click on the authorizer, and here this is our access token keyword. So let me copy this, and let's use the same here, and our value was xyz123. So click on the send. Okay, so we are getting response from our lambda function, and if I give some other value, we are getting message as a user is not authorized to access this resource, right? So let's go into the API gateway, click on this authorizer, click on the edit. Now what we will do here, we will change the event payload of the type of request, and here you can specify your token into multiple ways. So we are going to use query string parameter. So you can create a combination of this value as well, right? But we are going to use query string here. Key we will keep the same, that is authorization token, and click on the save changes. And let's go into the resources, click on the deploy API. Okay, so our API is deployed successfully on the dev stage. Next, what I will do, we will change our function. Okay, so initially what we are doing, we are reading value directly from this authorization token keyword from the event, right? Now what we will require to do, we will require to read that value from the query string parameter. Okay, so for that what we will do, we will just add one more parameter here, that will be query string parameter, and from this query string parameter read this token, that is authorization token. Now click on the deploy, and let's test this function. So let me go into the Postman. So access token we are going to send from the parameter. So let's remove this header, click on the parameter, and let me copy the keyword, that will be authorization token, and value will be xyz123. Click on the send. Okay, so we are getting the response from our lambda function. Now if you give any wrong value here, click on the send, you will get the exception, that is user not authorized to access this resource. So we have seen both the option. In first option we send the token from the header, in second option we send token from the query string parameter, right? Now next what we will do, we will create the API of the type HTTP. So let me go back into the API gateway. Let's go into APIs and click on the create API. API type will be HTTP. Click on the build, and let's give the API name. So API name will be demo HTTP API. Click on the next, click on the next. We will use the default. We will create a stage later on. So click on the next, click on the create button. Okay, so our HTTP API is created. Now let's create the routes in the HTTP API. So click on this create button. Resource name will be get, and here we are going to give name as a YT demo. Click on the create. So here you can see the route details. So first option is for the authorization. So here you can attach your authorizer, and second option for the integration, in which you can attach your backend service here. So as a part of integration, we are not going to attach Lambda function here. We are going to attach HTTP API. So AWS provides us one sample API to use for the demonstration. So if you go into the Google and let's search for the AWS Pet Store API. Okay, so this is the API in which you can get the sample response from particular APIs. And here you can find the sample URL. So let me copy this URL here and let's run this URL. And here you can see we are getting some sample JSON data. We are going to use same URL for our integration. So let me go into the API gateway, click on this attach integration. Click on the create and attach integration button. Here we are going to use HTTP URI. Method type will be of the type get. URL will be which we copied from the AWS documentation. Okay, let's click on the create button. Okay, so our API is created. Now click on the deploy. So here we have not created any stage. This is the default one. So click on the create stage option. So let's give name to our stage. So let me give name as a HTTP dev stage. And let's click on the create. So click on the deploy button here. Select the stage, that is HTTP dev stage. Click on the deploy stage option here. Okay, so our API is deployed on the stage. So let's copy this URL and let's run from the postman. Okay, so root name will be YT demo. Click on the send. So here you can see we are getting response successfully. Now let's go into the API gateway and we will create the authorizer for this route. So click on this routes option here. Click on this attach authorization option here. Click on the create and attach an authorizer. And here authorization type will be Lambda. And let's give name to our authorizer. So name will be HTTP authorizer auth. Okay. So you can give any name to your authorizer. Lambda function will be our Lambda for auth function. Okay. And here response mode is simple and the IAM policy. So let's select the IAM policy first. After this, we will see how to do configuration with the simple one. Okay. Let's disable this caching. So next option is identity source. So here you can specify your access token using this keyword. Okay. So whenever we send a request to call this API, we need to send the token using this authorization keyword in the header. Okay. Click on the create and attach button. Click on the deploy. Okay, so our API is deployed successfully. Now what we'll do, we will call this API. But before calling the API, let's change the code in the Lambda function according to this configuration. Okay, so what is the configuration change here? Changes this identity source. So we need to read value using this header dot authorization keyword. So let me go into the Lambda function. So in the Lambda function, we are going to do two changes. First change will be reading the token value. Okay, and second change will be in the resource section. So here, first parameter will be headers and second parameter will be this authorization. So let me remove this token. Okay, and next change will be in the resource section. So this method ARN keyword will be root ARN. Okay, so you get ARN in the root ARN keyword for the HTTP API. Now let's deploy this change. So next we will run the API from the postman. So let me go into the postman. And here we will provide the access token into the header. So key will be authorization and value will be XYZ123. Click on the send. Okay, so we are getting response successfully, right? Now let me go into the API gateway, click on the edit authorizer, and here we will change the response mode to simple. So what will happen in this case? Our Lambda authorizer will send the true or false value. Okay, click on the save button, and let's deploy this change to the stage. Now let's change our Lambda function. Now what we will do here, we will not return the IAM policy. We will return the true false value here. So let me change it here, and our status will be true or false. Okay, so what I'm doing here, if the key is getting matched, in that case it will send the true, or it will send the false back to the API gateway, right? Let's deploy this change. Okay, so let's call our URL from the postman. So click on the send button here. Okay, so we are getting response from the API. Okay, we successfully configured the Lambda authorizer for the both the API, that is for the REST API and the HTTP API. For the REST API, we see how to set up our Lambda event payload to token and the request. That means if you go into the REST API, for the first time we send the token using the header. After that, we change it to the request type, in which we send the header into the string parameter, right? After that, we created the HTTP API, in which we send the authorization token into the header, but we change the response type from the Lambda function. Okay, right? So for the first time, we send the response as a IAM policy, and for the simple type, we send the true or false back to the API gateway. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. Thanks for watching the video.